Peace be upon you, friends. Imagine a man. Despite being the richest in the village, he was spat upon by everyone, called Stingy, simply because he didn't pay for a cup of tea. They even prayed that he would die so his money would remain in the village. When he died, the villagers eagerly opened his famous chest, hoping to find the gold he had hidden. But what they found inside chilled everyone to the bone. A piece of cloth and a black-covered notebook brought by the baker. These were the words that brought shame to the entire village. Are you ready to learn this cautionary tale? A story that will bring tears to your eyes? In that small village on the vast Anatolian steppe, where winter snow blocked the roads and the smoke from burning dung hung in the sky, life was hard, but the people were tightly bound together except for one, Haja Murat. Murat Effendi, one of the oldest in the village, was actually a wealthy man. Everyone knew about the fields he inherited from his father, the large orchard at the entrance to the village, and the well-fed animals in his barn. But let's get to the story. Murat Effendi looked worse than the poorest. He wore a brown jacket he'd worn for 10 years, its color faded by the sun, its elbows patched and creased. His shoes had holes in the soles. He'd put cardboard inside them, but still wouldn't buy new ones. Even on the coldest winter days, he kept his stove burning sparingly, and there was not a sound coming from his house. The villagers no longer called him by his name. Behind his back and to his face, they called him Stingy Murat, miserly Haji, the man saving for his burial shroud. They'd laugh as if he'd have to pay for a greeting too. Murat Effendi ignored all of this. With his head bowed, his prayer beads in his hand, he would go to and from the mosque silently. That morning, the stove in the village square was crackling. The clinking of teacups mingled with the conversations. The topic had once again turned to Murat Effendi. As Ruza, the coffee-house owner, wiped the table with a cloth, he pointed to the window. Look, our guy's passing by again. Look at the coat he's wearing in this weather. Honestly, even scarecrows would laugh and fly away if you put it on them. Only God knows what he did with the money he got from selling the crops he harvested from his field. And maybe he put it under his pillow. The people in the coffee shop burst into laughter. One of the young men from the village chimed in, Quote 0. The village headman intervened, grimacing. Quote 1. The lies were unbelievable. A man with fields and gardens supposedly doesn't have the means. He'll take that money to his grave. Just then, the coffeehouse door creaked open. Haja Murat entered, a chilling coldness accompanying him. Suddenly, all the laughter ceased abruptly. Everyone bowed their heads or pretended to look away. Murat Effendi was aware of those icy stares. The heavy burden he had carried for years was not just the weight of his jacket, but of his soul as well. He silently sat down on the empty stool by the stove. His hands were purple and cracked from the cold. Shivering, he reached for the stove. Coffeehouse owner Ruza reluctantly approached him. Quote 2, he said, his voice hoarse. Quote 3, Murat Effendi said in a low voice. Quote 4, Ruza brought the tea and placed it forcefully on the table. Some spilled onto the saucer. Quote 5, he said mockingly. A few giggles came from the coffeehouse. Murat Effendi looked up. He looked into Ruza's eyes. There was no anger in those eyes, only a deep, very deep sadness. It was as if he was saying, "Oh, my son, if only you knew." But he said nothing. He counted the coins one by one from the tattered cloth handkerchief he took from his pocket. He left exactly the money for the tea on the table. He wouldn't leave a tip. He couldn't. As he sipped his tea, the door opened again. Garip Ali, the village's eccentric, entered. Ali was in tatters. He didn't have proper shoes on his feet. His nose was running from the cold and his hands were trembling. The people in the coffeehouse liked Ali. Some would buy him tea, others would give him bagels. The village headman immediately called out, "Come, Ali, come and warm yourself by the stove. Riza, make Ali an orange juice from me." Ali happily sat down by the stove, right next to Haja Murat. Murat Effendi looked at Ali. Ali's feet were wet, his socks were full of holes. Murat Effendi's hand went to his pocket, then stopped. Then it went again and stopped again. It was as if he was fighting an internal battle. Everyone was watching his actions. They wondered, will he take out some money and give it to him? But Murat Effendi pulled out his hand empty. He only fingered his prayer beads. Nobody knew that he had no money in his pocket and that he had counted every penny he had. The people in the coffee shop started whispering, Did you see? He didn't even buy a cup of tea for the poor man trembling beside him. His heart must be made of stone. And, Tosh. Actually, Murat Effendi's heart was bleeding. At that moment, he longed to hug Ali and say, quote 10, but he couldn't. He had a vow. Years ago, because of a mistake he made in his youth, he had made a promise to his Lord. "O Lord, my left hand will not see what my right hand gives. Let people think me stingy. Let people despise me. As long as you know me, I attribute both praise and blame to you." No one knew this secret. He was a man known as the richest in the village, but in reality he was a man of spiritual richness who secretly sent all his possessions to other villages, orphanages in the city, and madrasas that no one knew about. To curb his ego, he wore the oldest clothes and was content with the least. He considered every penny of his money a trust. That evening, as he walked home from the coffee shop, the words he heard behind him pierced him like an arrow. Someone had said, "If only the village's money would be of some use if he died." Murat Effendi stopped as he turned the corner of the dark street. He looked up at the sky, at the snow falling heavily. A single tear rolled down his cheek and mingled with his beard. "Hold on, Murat," he told himself. "It's almost over. The end of the road is in sight. Let them not know. Let them not know. It's enough that God knows." He opened the door of his house. Inside was no different from the outside. It was cold. He didn't light the lamp so as not to run out of kerosene. He performed his ablutions in the dark. He spread out his prayer mat. As he prayed the evening prayer, a storm howled outside. After the prayer, he pulled out the wooden chest from under his bed. There was no money in the chest, only old ledgers, thank you letters from orphanages, and a shroud. From the bottom of the chest, he pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside were the last few gold coins. These weren't his burial money. They were entrusted items that needed to be delivered to their rightful owner that night. After midnight, when the village was in a deep sleep, Hacha Murat put his coat back on. He wrapped his scarf tightly around his face, leaving only his eyes visible. He clutched the small purse tightly and slipped silently through the back door. The snow was knee-deep. The wind was cutting into his face. But he walked with quick steps, like a young man. His destination was the dilapidated house at the edge of the village, where a widowed woman and her 3 orphans lived, a place nobody ever visited. The woman's husband had died last year. They had no firewood or bread left in the house. Murat Effendi had heard this. When he arrived in front of the house, he looked around. There was no one there. He approached the door silently. He left the purse on the doorstep. Then he added a bag of bulgur and a bottle of oil, the last of his own provisions, to the house. He gently knocked on the door and immediately disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, the gossip mill was churning in the village again. Widow Fatma Bacha came to the grocer crying. He recounted. The villagers were astonished. They wondered. Quote, 18 said one. Quote, 19 said another. At that moment, Hacha Murat was passing in front of the grocery store. Without lifting his head or looking at anyone, he walked past. Riza, the coffee house owner, shouted after him. Quote, 20 Murat Effendi didn't stop. He quickened his steps, but his shoulders slumped even more. While his heart was filled with gratitude, his ego was crushed under the weight of those harsh insults. This was his greatest test, to do good and receive insults in return, and to endure it. But what was discussed in the coffee house that day was only the beginning. For Hacha Murat, the real great test would begin with the unexpected guest who would arrive at his door. And that incident would fuel the villagers' hatred to such an extent that Murat Effendi would no longer be able to even go out into the streets of the village. That year, winter had descended upon the village like a nightmare. Icicles stretched like swords from the roofs. The windows were covered in ice. The villagers' problem wasn't just the cold. Poverty had also arrived. Those who ran out of firewood would turn to their neighbors. Those who ran out of flour would borrow from others. But there was only one door that everyone knocked on, placed their hopes in, but always returned empty-handed, Haja Murat's door. Murat Effendi's stinginess had become a legend, even an object of hatred in the village. When children saw him in the street, they would run away, shouting, quote, 21 women would angrily slam their windows shut. And he, under this heavy burden, was shrinking a little more each day, becoming a little quieter. It was a Friday. The congregation had gathered in the mosque courtyard, waiting for prayer time. The topic was again the struggle for survival. Just then, a boy of about 10 or 11 years old, breathless, disheveled, and wearing torn rubber shoes, burst through the courtyard gate. He was Omer, the poorest man in the village, an orphan whose father had died working on a construction site. Omer's face was pale from the cold and from crying. His eyes searched the crowd for someone, and finally he found Hacha Murat sitting alone in the far corner under the porch. With hope, with a desperate attempt to find a solution, the boy ran to the old man. The entire village, the headman, Riza, the coffee house owner, and the imam watched this scene with bated breath. Omer stood before Hacha Murat. With trembling hands, he clung to the hem of the man's jacket. Quote 22, he said, his voice choked with sobs. Quote 23. He continued, quote 24, quote 25. Murat Effendi saw the fear in the child's eyes. Only God knew the storm raging in his heart at that moment. He didn't have a single penny in his pocket. Last night, he had secretly slipped the last of his money under the door to another poor person outside the village. He had nothing left to sell in his house. He had even secretly sold the last memento from his late wife, the copper pans, to a scrap dealer last week and given the money as charity. Now what was he going to do? Who would believe him if he said he had no money? Murat Effendi, the owner of those vast fields, had no money. Even the crows would laugh. If he said he would pay later, the child was now desperately searching for a solution. And worst of all, if he were to take out the money he didn't have and give it to the child or say, let me handle it, the secret of the charity he had carefully kept for years would be broken. His ego would take over. People would say, look, they're not that stingy. and the reward for his good deed would be diminished. He had dedicated his life to the saying, "Let not your left hand know what your right hand gives." Murat Effendi bowed his head. He bowed his head. He tightly closed his eyes. He prayed, "O Lord, what a heavy trial this is. You are my witness. No, I swear no. I distributed what I had for your sake. Now don't humiliate me in front of this orphan, in front of these people, but don't reveal my secret either." Then he slowly removed the child's hands from his jacket. He put on that harsh, emotionless mask. "Quote 30, he said. His voice was deliberately cold and irritable. "Everyone thinks I'm a wealthy man, but I have no money except for my burial expenses. Go cry to someone else. Go tell the village headman. Let the state take care of you. You won't get a penny from me." Omer couldn't believe what he heard. He staggered backward. The light of hope in his eyes went out. It was replaced by deep disappointment and anger. "May God punish you as he sees fit, Haji uncle," the child shouted. The curse he uttered with his childlike heart echoed in the courtyard. "If my mother dies, may my right be forbidden to you. May you lie in the grave with that money, God willing." A murmur rose in the mosque courtyard as the child ran away crying. This was the last straw. Riza, the coffee-house owner, jumped up. He advanced towards Murat Effendi. "Shame on you," he shouted. "Disgrace on your beard, shameless man. Where are you burying the money from your fields? You turned away an orphan, a tearful child from your door. And that's my burial money," he continued. "We'll collect that money. If necessary, we'll sell our jackets, but we won't be as heartless as you." The village headman intervened, but he too was angry. "Haji Murat," he said, his voice trembling, "what you've done is inhuman. You are the disgrace of this village. If only you had a gram of conscience instead of that wealth." Murat Effendi slowly rose from his seat. His knees trembled, but not from the cold, but from sorrow. The words disgrace pierced his heart like a dagger, but he didn't answer. He didn't defend himself. "I swear I have no money. I gave it all away." He didn't say. Because if he did, the devotion, the secrecy, the secret between him and God that he had accumulated over the years would be broken. He could only whisper, quote 40, and he walked away through the open path, as if he were a leper untouched by anyone, amidst the hateful stares of the crowd. The insults and curses rained down on him. When he arrived home, he locked the door. He leaned his back against the door and collapsed to the floor. That steadfast man, that stingy Murat, was gone. In his place came an old man sobbing, his beard wet with tears. Quote 41, he said, beating his chest. Quote 42. Quote 43. That night, Haji Murat couldn't sleep. He thought until morning. Orphan Omer's mother couldn't go without medicine. He had to do something, but he had no money left. Just before the morning call to prayer, an idea came to him. He had an antique, silver-plated pocket watch, inherited from his grandfather, kept hidden at the bottom of a chest. It had immense sentimental value. It was his father's only memento. Quote 44, he said, looking at the watch. Quote 45, he wrapped the watch in a cloth. After the morning prayer, before anyone woke up, he boarded the milk truck going to town on the road outside the village. He went to the jeweler in the city. He sold the watch. He put the money he received in an envelope. On the envelope, he changed his handwriting and wrote in shaky letters, quote 46. Then he wrote to the strange man he knew from the village, who was considered the village's madman and who knew how to keep secrets. He found Ali in the city. Ali sometimes went down to the town and collected paper from the garbage. Ali, he said, handing him the envelope, he said, take this. Throw it under Omer's door without anyone seeing you. But whatever you do, don't tell anyone that you saw me, that I gave it to you. If you tell anyone, I will not forgive you. Ali's eyes lit up when he saw the money, but when he saw Murat Effendi's serious look, he shook his head. I won't tell anyone, Haji Baba. I swear I won't tell anyone. With an angel, I'd say he brought it. That afternoon there was a festive atmosphere in the village again. Omer had run to the coffeehouse with joy. Quote 50, he shouted. Quote 51. The people in the coffeehouse were surprised. Quote 52, they asked. Quote 53, said Omer. Quote 54. The people in the coffeehouse all said, quote 55 in unison. Quote 56. Murat Effendi was watching Omer running into the house through the frosted glass of his window. When he saw the bags of medicine in the boy's hand, a pale but peaceful smile appeared on his face. He didn't care about the curses he had received. The orphan was smiling, and his mother was cured. What did it matter if the world burned? When Murat Effendi went to bed that night, he felt very tired, a strange feeling in his chest. There was a tightness in his chest. He was having trouble breathing. It was as if the weariness of years, combined with the weight of the curses of that day, had settled in his heart. He fixed his eyes on the ceiling. Quote 57, he whispered. Quote 58. The next morning, the village square was bustling as usual, but one person was missing. Haji Murat hadn't come to morning prayer. Noon came, still no sign of him. Afternoon came. That old man in the patched jacket didn't appear. Coffeehouse owner Riza died. Quote 59, he muttered. Quote 60. Laughing and with a little curiosity, they walked towards Hachamurat's house. The door was locked. The windows were frozen. The village headman pounded on the door. Hachamurat, answer me! There was no sound. They forced the door open and broke it down. When they entered, they realized the house was freezing cold. The stove looked as if it hadn't been lit for days, and there, on the old iron bed in the middle of the room, lay Hachamurat, wrapped in a thin blanket. His face was turned toward the Sibla. His eyes were closed, and on his face was a radiant smile that swept away all the earthly sorrows. Murat Effendi had passed away from this false world, but the real story didn't end with his death. On the contrary, it was just beginning, because the villagers were about to experience the greatest shock of their lives with what they would find in that miser's house. Hachamurat's lifeless body lay there on the old iron bed under his patched quilt. When the village headman and his companions entered the room, the first thing they felt wasn't the coldness of death, but the emptiness of the house. Coffeehouse owner Ruza scanned the room with his eyes. The walls were bare, the rug on the floor was tattered, the stove in the corner was empty. Clearly it hadn't been lit for days. "Where are they?" Ruza said, his voice echoing. "Where are those bags of money? Where are those gold coins under the pillow?" The village headman went to the famous wooden chest under the bed. "It must be here," he said. "A miserly man doesn't put his money in the bank. He hides it in his pocket." They opened the chest. Do you know what came out? Not a wad of cash, not a single gold coin. The chest was filled with yellowed papers, old prescriptions, and thank you letters, and at the very bottom there was a pristine white shroud. A carefully folded shroud sprinkled with rosewater. "What is this?" one of the villagers exclaimed in disappointment. "Did the man spend the money or bury it somewhere?" At that moment the headman found a small note on the lid of the chest. It simply read, "My God, I wanted to come to you pure, without having wronged anyone, without being a burden to anyone. My shroud is made of halal money. I have no wood to heat my water, but my faith is warm. Bury me in the poor man's cemetery. Let no one be a burden." A silence fell over the room. But this silence was not from respect, but from astonishment. There were those who still thought he was faking it. There were those who whispered, "This old man definitely buried the money in the garden." As the funeral procession left the house, the call to prayer was recited in the village. "Murat Effendi, one of the residents of our village, has passed away." Those who heard the call to prayer in the coffee house, in their homes, and in the street all uttered the same sentence. "Stingy Murat is dead. Who did his money go to?" May God forgive his sins, but what a useless man he was. He never even bought a cup of tea in his life. When the time for the noon prayer arrived, there was a strange scene at the funeral platform. Generally, when someone died in the village, the funeral platform would be overflowing, the courtyard wouldn't be able to accommodate everyone. But today, only the imam was at the head of the funeral platform. The village headman, who was there as required, washed the body, and there was also Garip Ali, the village madman. Garip Ali sat at the foot of the coffin, sobbing like a child. Quote 71, he said. Quote 72, coffeehouse owner Riza and a few villagers watched from a distance, smoking cigarettes by the mosque wall. They hadn't even bothered to stand for the funeral prayer. "We owe him a debt, one of them said. "We greeted him, but he didn't respond. We asked for help, but he didn't give it. Now, what right do we have to pray for him?" The imam, wearing his robe, looked at the small congregation with teary eyes. His heart ached. He had seen that radiance on Murat Effendi's face while washing the body. He realized how great a soul was hidden within that frail skeletal body. He felt it. He recited the takbir, for each person's sake. Only 4 people stood in the row. The wind was whipping the green cloth on the coffin. It was as if even nature was rebelling against this loneliness. The prayer ended. The imam turned to the congregation and the villagers standing in the distance to ask that classic question. "O congregation, how did you know the deceased?" There was a deep silence. No one shouted, "We knew him well." Only Garip Ali groaned, "He was very good, very good." The imam swallowed. He asked again, "Do you forgive him?" From afar, the voice of Riza, the coffeehouse owner, was heard from the wall. "What should we forgive, Imam? What good did he do for us? May God do as he sees fit." The others also murmured, "We don't forgive him, we don't forgive him." And then, that moment, that very shameful moment, the gate of the mosque courtyard opened with a loud bang. Salih, the baker, burst in, breathless, his apron covered in flour, his hair disheveled. Salih was the village baker. He was usually a quiet, calm man, but now fire was shooting from his eyes. He held a worn notebook with a thick black cover. He ran to the funeral stone. Breathless, he embraced the coffin. Then angrily he turned around. He looked at the crowd, the villagers, standing in the distance. "Shame on you," he shouted. His voice echoed like thunder in the mosque courtyard. "Shame on your humanity. Shame on your Islam." Everyone had gone too far. They had never seen Salih like this before. "Why are you shouting, Sali?" said the village headman. "We're at a funeral. Have some decency." Sali raised the thick notebook in his hand. The pages of the notebook fluttered in the wind. "Decency?" Sali cried out. "You lost decency the day you left this man to die alone, hungry and thirsty. You called him stingy, miserly, worthless. Damn it, this man lying in this coffin is Hachimura." His voice trembled, his throat tightened. Tears streamed from his eyes. "Do you know what this is in my hand?" he asked, shaking the notebook. "This is the ledger of debts. The ledger where those debts are written, the ones you cried about not being able to pay, and then forgot about." He turned to Riza. "Riza, last winter, my child was sick. The shop wasn't doing any business. Didn't you ask me to waive your flour debt? You thought I waived it, didn't you? I didn't. This man, this Hachimura, came in the middle of the night.